Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 17th of February, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. We have a lot of ways you can do that, and you can start by going to weather.gov/Alaska. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll find a lot of different access points to the forecast, to current weather information, to warnings, watches, and advisories. And of course, you can find us on social media in the middle of the day between Alaska weather shows on Facebook at NWS Alaska. Juneau was talking about how fine their weather is right now. Don't worry, Juneau and Southeast, you'll get yours soon enough. And of course, for all of Alaska, you can find us on Twitter, NWS Alaska, with the hashtag AKwx, and on YouTube in the afternoon at NWS Anchorage. You can get your daily afternoon map briefing, and then you'll see those same surface charts here on this show. And on all of Alaska's, NWS Alaska, you can also find a lot of interesting information there all day long. Just check out the interviews that we've done here on Alaska Weather TV. And speaking of which, from our broadcast partner, Alaska Public Media, if you type in AKwx TV on the YouTube search bar or in Google, you should be able to find the complete broadcast of this show. So a little bit later on in the evening, if you come in a little bit late from the ship or the boat and you'd like to check out the entire forecast and the marine weather or the aviation weather, if you're flying the next day, you can certainly do that just by recapping the show on YouTube there. So a way to get that. And of course, the weather info line is already open at 800-472-0391. The hazardous weather looks like this. We have wind moving across the Alaska Range and over the Denali area, and also for areas west of Delta Junction in the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Those gusts could reach over 50 to 55 miles per hour. Those advisories will go through the remainder of tonight and into the early morning hours. A look to the north and west also shows more winter weather there. We'll talk about that in a minute. From Dillingham and north, a winter weather advisory is posted there for some strong and gusty winds that'll come in, but mainly we're talking about snow that could accumulate from areas north of Dillingham for about 4 to 7 inches. That'll go through tonight and into the early morning hours tomorrow. I'll look northward, shows what's left of our blizzard warnings for the interior of the Seward Peninsula, the Selawik region, as well as the areas in the northern Seward Peninsula, including Shishmaref, and along the Chukchi Seacoast all the way up toward Wainwright. Winter weather advisories are in effect tonight and into early tomorrow. We're still talking about blowing and drifting snow that could cut back on visibilities. Additional snowfall should not be as intense as it has been, but the visibility reduction there and the gusty winds will still be an issue as the frontal boundary is still working through the area. So winter weather advisories in the north, wind advisories across the higher terrain of the Alaska Range, including the Deltana and Tanana Flats region from Delta Junction and westward, and a winter weather advisory for some parts of Bristol Bay, generally north of Dillingham, for accumulating snow and poor visibility there. Here's a look at the big weather picture, and you can see there's a pretty sharp contrast in the weather. Beautiful on this side, not so nice under the white clouds, and then much colder under the kind of speckledy clouds there. That mackerel sky is easy to see on the satellite pictures, always a really good indicator of colder air flowing in behind a weather system. You can see a really sharp contrast in that weather with the front that's working through across western and southwestern Alaska, and then the big ball of clouds here across the north is the upper level low pressure system that's collected a lot of the moisture and the cold and is keeping the wind going, especially around Kotzebue Sound and the Chukchi Seacoast over Norton Sound, and is bringing additional snowfall opportunities for areas from Dillingham northward. Out across the east, though, things have settled down across southeast and across the Copper River Basin. However, we'll probably get into some gusty winds in the offshore areas here coming up. For southeast, sun is out, and the sun will probably stay out for the next several days as conditions keep things fairly calm and quiet for a large part of southeast. So if you've got to get stuff done outside right now, temperatures aren't that cold, 30s and 40s by day. They should stay that way for most areas as we get into Thursday and maybe into Friday as well. A look at the satellite loop one more time shows that low pressure is going to split off in a couple different pieces here across the central and western Gulf Coast. You can already see one of these circulations forming here south of Kodiak Island. This is going to keep rain and some wind across the north and western Pacific as we go through the next couple days. Meanwhile, the frontal boundary working into the interior is going to start to fall apart and lose a lot of its punch there. So anything that we see across the west doesn't necessarily translate into the interior. So never fear for the Alcan border regions. It's just going to remain kind of status quo for you, it looks like. Now here's a weather map, and you can see the occlusion working eastward into the Seward Peninsula, the Norton Sound region, and also across southwestern Alaska. Once again, we're watching for that winter weather to set in for areas north of Dillingham for 4 to 7 inches of snow there. We were seeing a little bit of light snow around St. Paul and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. There's that second circulation shaping up there west of Kodiak Island. East side, we're looking at rainfall. To the south and west of this, we've got enough cold air that any precipitation that was falling between Castle Cape and Chignik was generally looking like snow at this point. East of that, we've got a ridge of high pressure, and things were fairly quiet there. We had a nice clear sky from Sitka all the way into the places around Angoon and northward toward Haines and Skagway. We saw a few more low clouds there, but all in all, things look like fairly quiet weather situation there for a large part of southeast. A look into the interior, we had some low clouds around the region earlier in the day. A lot of what you're seeing on the satellite picture, though, is simply the cold air that's stuck in place, blowing and drifting snow around the Seward Peninsula and Kotzebue Sound and offshore of the Kotzebue coastline, offshore of Kotzebue for sure, but offshore of the Chukchi Sea coastline, I should say. And then westward, we've got a new area of low pressure working itself toward the western Aleutians, Shemya and Attu included. Now for tonight, generally clear skies expected for most of the middle Tanana Valley and points east along the Alcan and into the Copper River Basin. We'll have a few clouds around the Cook Inlet region. We're going to have to watch for some fog, though. It depends on how strong the zone of high pressure sets up across most of south central. But with low pressure just to the south, the pressure gradient should start to pick up a little bit there. We're going to see more moisture flowing into the Barren Islands and maybe into the Seward and Homer region. A lot of this precipitation looks like it hangs down to the south for just a little bit longer, though. As the front works into the Seward Peninsula as well as the YK Delta, we have a better opportunity for snow to form for those places from Dillingham northward. The wind's going to pick up, and that means snow and blowing snow will be a possibility still for areas around the Bering Strait and the Seward Peninsula, including Kotzebue Sound. For St. Matthew Island, we're watching the ice slowly work toward your region there, but it looks like we'll have a better chance for snow showers in that area. So anybody still out on the ships there across the region just south of St. Matthew Island probably want to keep an eye on the ice edge as it advances further south in the coming days. For the Pribilov, snow showers still a potential there, as well as areas in the eastern Aleutians. And here comes the next wave of weather working across the western chain and into places like Adak and Atka on that southwesterly flow. There's still enough cold air there. It looks like we'll have initially an opportunity for some snow. That should quickly switch over to rain and snow as we get into the early morning hours of tomorrow, and then right back into snow showers there for most of the day on Thursday. Low pressure will work through the central chain with that second surge, and then stronger southerlies work in across the eastern Aleutians as we get into Thursday afternoon. Snow continues for parts of the Pribilov, St. Matthew, and into the Gulf of Anadyr with a low down to 962 millibars. In the meantime, the frontal boundary that's already on the west coast is falling apart as it advances eastward. It's running into a pretty stable area of high pressure across the interior, across the north slope. That's still got a little bit of wind, it looks like, working across the north slope and the coastal plain. The intense areas of blowing and drifting snow, though, from blizzard conditions that we saw earlier in the week have settled down, though. Low pressure around Kodiak Island at 982 millibars. Not strong enough to punch into the stable air across southeast. You'll still get some nice weather on Thursday, it looks like, even though you've got a wave of weather just to your south over Haida Gwaii that's trying to drift south and east. This will hover just around that region south and west of Haida Gwaii on Friday. We might start to see a little bit of rain and snow sneak up into the southern inner channels there and maybe along the outer coast, but a lot of this is really going to stay away from southeast, it looks like, at least until the beginning of Friday. We'll see what happens by the afternoon. And then across south central, pockets of rain and snow will hover around Prince William Sound and into the southern parts of Cook Inlet. Looks like mainly light rainfall there and for Kodiak Island. And notice what's happening with the weather out across the North Pacific. As that wave is working itself across, it can't really move northward, so what does it do? It drops southward and it's going to recurve back across the central and western Gulf there. In the meantime, the interior, pretty dry stuff. You'll get some wind across the Alaska Range, maybe some blowing snow in a few areas. For the North Slope, a few more clouds are settling in for Friday. Areas of blowing and drifting snow will be possible. And for the Bering Strait communities, including the Seward Peninsula, snow showers remain possible there with another front holding just to the west of the Pribilofs and working itself into the eastern chain. That coupling up with low pressure south of the eastern Aleutians at 968 millibars means pretty unsettled weather as you wrap into the end of the week, and probably some stronger winds there working through the central Aleutians all the way through Unimak Pass and probably the Alaska Peninsula, getting in on some active weather for wind and maybe rain and snow there toward Friday. Let's look at your surface weather. Let's roll back the hands of time and look at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 30s and 40s here for Sitka at 42, Ketchikan and Annette in the lower 40s today. Capital City holding pretty close to 40 degrees today and plenty of sunshine back again tomorrow. Around 30 in Valdez, 40 in Cordova, 27 for Anchorage this afternoon. Homer and Seward in the upper 30s today. Around the Matanuska Glacier, it was only 9. It was 17 out around Glen Ellen, 6 in Northway with 1 below in Eagle. 13 above in Fairbanks this afternoon. Healy made it up to 29 degrees. Pretty nice day, a little bit higher up. 2 below in Fort Yukon. It was even colder for Arctic Village this afternoon. Temps were generally below 0 for the North Coast, around 5 to 10 below in some cases. Kaktovik, though, made it up to 4 above. For Kotzebue today, 17 degrees, 18 in Shishmaref with Nome at 25. We saw similar temperatures for most of Norton Sound. Unalakleet was just shy of 30 degrees. McGrath was showing 10, Bethel about 29 degrees, Nunivak Island 28. Areas out on St. Lawrence Island in the low to mid 20s there, and eastern Siberia also in the lower to mid 20s, considerably warmer than earlier this week. For Bristol Bay, temps are hovering close to freezing this afternoon, a little bit above it for Kodiak Island. Both temperatures in the mid-30s today, and mid-30s we're seeing for most of the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint 37, Unalaska and Dutch Harbor close to 34. St. Paul and St. George just a little bit below the freezing point for most of the day. St. George made it up to 32 by late afternoon, and low to mid-30s for the central and western chain with Shimmy at 31. Overnight low temps tonight will go well below 0. Looks like most areas around Fairbanks and north and east anywhere from 5 to 15 to even 25 below there. South central in the teens and 20s, southeast in the lower to mid 30s for most places. Upper 20s and lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. The YK Delta in the teens with Nome at 12. Kotzebue at 11 and Barrow at 11 below. High temperatures tomorrow cutting into just about 0 for most of the North Slope. For the Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks, 7 above, 20s and 30s for South Central. Kodiak closer to 40. Southeast in the mid to upper 30s there. Ketchikan and Annette, and Craig and Klawock closer to 40 degrees. St. Paul 34. 18 around Bethel tomorrow, 19 in Nome, and St. Lawrence Island in the lower 20s. Flying weather shows much improved conditions over what we saw earlier in the week for the North Slope, but watch for MVFR through most of Kotzebue Sound. Pockets of IFR across the coastal areas of Norton Sound and west of the western Alaska Range. Out over the open water, look for areas of MVFR with occasional IFR. And for the eastern and central Aleutians, we'll watch for IFR conditions along the frontal boundaries. It's marching eastward toward the Pribilofs. Pass conditions look like this. Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass should both be VFR through most of the day. Might be a little breezy though. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, MVFR conditions to start worsening, especially on the west side throughout the day. Rainy Pass, we expect marginal conditions there. Windy Pass right now looks to be VFR throughout the day. Isabel Pass looks to be about the same. Mentasta Pass, visual flight rule throughout the day. Tanita Pass looks pretty good for your Thursday, and Portage Pass we expect to turn over toward VFR as we get into the afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass at this point expected to be visual flight rule throughout most of the day. Your freezing levels show that any warm air aloft has really retreated to the south, so our surface freezing line's really all we have, and that's hovering very close to the Pribilofs and right over the Alaska Peninsula for the most part right now, and across coastal parts of southeast for your Thursday. Icing potentials generally above 3 to about 5,000 feet, moving in toward places like St. Matthew and the central chain with occasional moderate. We'll have hit and miss occasional moderate inside of the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, and across the western Alaska Range down toward Kodiak Island above 5,000 feet across south central regions. The jet stream right now showing the main weather thoroughfare well south of Alaska with wind speeds though at 175 to 180 knots. It is no trouble at all for weather systems to zip along the North Pacific and move into the Gulf of Alaska. We do have a little bit of a southerly flow working out of the Bering Strait. With that at 80 knots, we are seeing more of a little bit of southerly traffic across the western coast and helping to develop storms there across the west coast of Alaska. At 9,000 feet, we've got southerlies picking up the pace at 30 to 50 knots for the central and eastern chain. And low pressure across the western Gulf with wind speeds there around 5 to as high as 25 knots. And light winds across the north slope at 20 to 30. And southerlies going across the west coast, 25 to 50 there at 3,000 feet. A little bit more of a west and northwesterly flow over the chain. And east and southeasterly wind across the Gulf Coast, 15 to 25 there with light winds across the interior. So turbulence will mainly focus across the Alaska range. Remember, we have wind advisories for areas along the Deltana and Tanana Flats and across the western Alaska range there around the Healy and Denali area below 6,000 feet. So watch for some chop to continue tomorrow. And across the frontal boundary working through the Bering Sea anywhere from about 4,000 feet and lower. Occasional moderate for St. Matthew, the Pribilofs, as well as the central and eastern Aleutians and parts of the Alaska Peninsula and Shelikof Strait. That's a look at your aviation forecast. Perry Denny will be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
They're called hooligan candlefish, cigarfish. They're really, really oily fish. They're a little on the mushy side, so we like to fry them. And we decided to go upriver about maybe half mile upriver and fish off the bank there. For me, one of the nice things about the fish is actually that there's a lot of other populations other than like the local Athabascans and Alaska Native people that go down there and take advantage of it. There's a lot of Pacific Island people, a lot of Korean people, a lot of other Asian folks out there. They all love these little fish, and they all go out there every year and catch them, bring them home. I think people really just enjoy getting their own food. Obviously, we don't have to. We could just go to the store, but it's kind of like the principle, you know, you go out there and you're going out there with your family and your friends and you're, you know, getting food. I take my family out, that's the way I grew up. I grew up in Nome. We spent a lot of our winter and definitely all of our summer subsistence hunting and fishing. And for me, I don't know, I just feel like it was a great way to grow up, and it's really foreign to me when people don't have those experiences. And so I really, really wanted my kids to, you know, have that experience and to know where their food comes from. You know, I don't want them just to think that all their fish comes from the grocery store or comes packaged in little packages of meat. Like, I want them to know that it comes from other beings that live on this earth, and, you know, for them to have some respect for that. There's a lot of other distractions, like my oldest son really, really likes Angry Birds a lot, way too much. I want him to learn to enjoy being outside and learning to enjoy harvesting your own food. When I was growing up, actually, my mom, she gets amazed by this, but she literally would wake up in the morning, eat breakfast, and go out and play, and she would have no clue where we were or what we were doing until lunchtime. Then we'd come back hungry, eat, and then go back outside and play again until it was night. I don't know, maybe if the world's changed or just because she's gotten older or whatever, but now with my kids, like, she can't even let them out of her sight. I started working in canneries. I started working on the docks for a little bit, ended up on a tender, went over to Bristol Bay, so I spent some time commercial fishing. Then I actually traveled around the United States as a pitch salesman for a little bit. Like the dude who sells the ShamWow, kind of like the commercials that you see on TV where everything's $29.95, $19.95, $9.95. I would do that live starting at the Alaska State Fair. I stopped being a pitch salesman. I went to my brother's Marine Corps graduation, my younger brother, and when I was watching that, I decided that was something that I would like to do. And then went back home to Alaska and then joined the Marine Corps from Alaska. Well, we were scouts. Our job was to be on the ground. And so our job was anything that had to do on the ground. We were forward recon. We'd clear houses and stuff like that. Every time that we stopped, we'd do a sweep for IEDs, improvised explosive devices. I'm sure everybody knows what those are by now. Even when I was growing up, my mom said that after I got done with high school, I was going to go to college, and I wasn't going to college for me. You know, she said that you know, you need to go to college so you can learn, and then you can come back and then you can, you know, serve your people, basically. I guess that just was part of the way that we were raised. I mean, even when we were out fishing, I wasn't just fishing for myself. I was actually fishing for friends and family as well. You know, and it's not a burden or anything. I'm happy to do it, you know, and the Marine Corps wasn't a burden either. It was kind of a pain at times, but I really feel like maybe part of the reason why I try to do the subsistence stuff so much is because the education that I want to get now is my AKwx education, you know. Even though I did grow up subsistence and stuff like that, we moved away right around the time that I would have been going out and starting to do things like seal hunting and, you know, going on the big hunting trips and stuff like that. So I never actually got to do that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to learn it all now, and I'd like to go home and I'd like to learn the AKwx language. I know some, I don't know enough, and I'd like to learn more, you know, about how we do things. My AKwx name is Nava. How we name is that when you're born, whoever has died around the time that you're born, you get their name. You know, so I got my name was from my great-grandma, Mamie Seaton. Her name was Nava. I don't know what it means. I asked one of my uncles about it, and he just told me that the name was one of those, it was an old name, so they didn't actually know what it meant anymore. And so I think about that, about how far back that name goes. You know, if it's thousands of years, if it's 5,000 years, 6,000 years, how far back that name goes. And so it's just, it's a really tangible connection with my past and history, and it helps ground me and to know where I come from, and that I literally am standing here because of all the people that came before me on this entire planet. I think that we've become really arrogant and really disconnected from not only just like the earth, and I also hate how cheesy that sounds now. Like, people have made it cheesy to where I sound like some sort of hippie when I say the connection to the earth, but hey, that's legit. I mean, we are part of the earth.
Welcome back to your Alaska weather. I'm meteorologist Perry Daney. Now for your Thursday marine forecast for the southeast panhandle. You're going to have northerly winds 35 knots on Lynn Canal and start diminishing to 15 knots as you get down to Dixon Entrance. There'll be some stronger gusts out of Lynn Canal. And then out of the outside waters, you'll have easterly winds 10 to 20 knots, wave heights 8 to 9 feet. For Friday, you're going to have continued northerly winds out of the inside waters, gale force winds out of Lynn Canal, higher gusts to 60 knots. And then as you get down to Dixon Entrance, you're going to have southeasterly winds 30 knots. The outside waters, you'll have southwesterly winds at 30 knots, 30 knots. And then easterly small craft 30 to 25 knots all the way up to Yakutat. For Thursday marine forecast for South Central, northeast winds 10 knots out of the Prince William Sound, and then easterly small craft winds as you go down the eastern Kenai Peninsula and then to the Barren Islands. And then out of the Cook Inlet, you're going to have a small craft starting to build as you get to the southern Cook Inlet out of the north direction, and then the gale force as you get down to Shelikof out of the northerly direction. Across the Kodiak Island, you're going to have northwesterly winds 45 knots. And then your wave heights are going to be 5 knots and strong at higher heights at 18 knots, 18 feet for the Kodiak region. And then for Friday marines forecast, again, continued northeast flow coming out of the Prince William Sound, and then small craft through the eastern Kenai into the Barren Island region, as well as down to Kodiak. Wave heights are going to be 3 to 13 feet. Again, northerly winds out of the Cook Inlet, and then a little stronger as you get to the southern, and then small craft as you go down to the Shelikof region, and they'll be out of the east. Now the marine forecast for Alaska Peninsula, predominantly all northwesterly. You have a high ridge pressure ridge to your west. Again, cold air filtering in, and you're getting stronger winds. Wave heights will be 12 to 17 feet, and 35 to 40 knots on the Pacific side. For Friday, again, the winds will stay predominantly all northwesterly, small craft on the Bering side, and then gale force on the Pacific side, gusting out of the bays and passes. Then the marine forecast for Aleutian Islands for Thursday, you're going to have a system that's starting to enter the central Aleutians. So out ahead of it, you have southerly winds they're showing here. They're gale force 35 to 40 knots, and then wave heights anywhere from 17 to 19 feet. Then on the backside of the system, from Shemya to Atka, you'll have westerly winds 45, 35 knots, and wave heights 21 to 23 feet. For Friday, you're going to have a northwesterly flow across the Bering side for the central Aleutians, and then stronger winds on the Pacific side, a gust of 50 knots there, just west of Nikolsky. From Shemya to Atka, on the backside of the system, you're going to have westerly winds, gale force, and then northwesterly there near Atka and Adak. For the west coast, Thursday marine forecast, predominantly all southeasterly from Cape Nunavik all the way up to St. Lawrence Island, and then southerly from the Pervelos up to St. Matthew. And then for Friday, you're going to have northeasterly winds going through the northern Barents Sea along through the Bristol Bay region, small craft again, and then easterly from St. Matthew Island westward, and then southeasterly from St. Paul Island. Then the marine forecast for the Arctic coast, you're going to have northeasterly flow, small craft, and then become more easterly as you go along the northwest coastline. And then along through the Bering Strait, you're going to have southeasterly winds, small craft. Again, no wave heights due to the ice cover. Then for Friday, you'll have easterly winds for the Arctic coastline, northwesterly on the northwest coastline, and then northerly going through the Bering Strait. Now for tonight's forecast, you'll have, again, this included low sitting over Kodiak with a included front over the Gulf. You'll have rain, and then a mixture of rain and snow over the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Range. And then with this other cooler front over the southwest territory, you'll have snow showers and included low farther west with a wintry mix. That's your Alaska weather. I'm meteorologist Perry Daney.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.